The old man sat on the edge of the wooden pier, his boots dangling just above the black surface of the lake. His hands trembled slightly, not from age alone, but from something darker, something gnawing inside him. Behind him, the night hummed with cicadas and the occasional hoot of an owl. He stared down at the water as though it whispered to him, as though it promised both answers and endings. The hook came suddenly, a scream. A young boy's scream, piercing, echoing from the woods on the far side of the lake. The old man did not move at first. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched tight. He had heard that sound before years ago, in another place, when the world was painted red with violence. His heart lurched. His bones ached with memory. He knew he should not go. But he also knew he could not stay. His name was Ivan Petrov, 76 years old. A man carved from storms and silence, living alone in a crumbling wooden house at the edge of the village. To the children, he was a ghost, a shadow behind foggy windows. To the adults, he was a relic, tolerated but avoided. They whispered about him in the marketplace, the war-scarred veteran, the man who had killed, the man who had survived when others did not. His daily life was simple, almost painfully so. He rose at dawn, lit the stove, boiled water, ate stale bread. He walked to the fields and cut wood, though his joints screamed in protest. He smoked his pipe on the porch. He sat in silence as the sun slid behind the forest. It was not life, not really. It was survival, the bare minimum of existence. But Ivan had not always been like this. Once, he had been a soldier, a commander in the Soviet army. He had led men through snow and fire, through jungles and deserts, depending on orders that came from faceless voices in high offices. He had been ruthless then, or so he believed. He had been feared, respected, and above all, necessary. His hands had known the weight of rifles, his ears the roar of artillery. He had buried comrades in foreign soil. And he had carried the screams of the dying back with him, hidden like parasites in his chest. After the war, he had returned home to a young wife, Anna, and a son, Kirill. For a time, he had tried to be a father, a husband. He had tried to believe in the ordinary joys of the world, dinners together, laughter, the scent of bread cooling on the windowsill. But he could never quite shake the shadows. His voice was always too harsh, his temper too sharp, his silence too heavy. Anna had grown weary. Kirill had grown afraid. When Anna died of illness years later, Ivan was left only with his son. But even that bond withered. By the time Kirill became a man, he had vanished into the city, leaving behind nothing but a letter with cold, final words. You were never really here. You were always somewhere else. So Ivan remained alone while the world moved on. He had grown older, stiffer, more bitter. He was not loved, but neither was he hated. He simply existed, a shadow by the lake, a memory others tried not to recall. But now the scream from the woods tore through him, ripping away years of quiet decay. It wasn't just a sound. It was a wound, reopening with merciless precision. He remembered the faces of boys he had once led, the way they had called his name when bullets ripped them apart. He remembered his son's eyes, wide with disappointment, with anger. Something inside him shifted. Ivan rose from the pier, his knees cracking, and reached for the heavy coat draped across the wooden post. The scream had faded, swallowed by the night, but its echo still rang in his skull. He could have ignored it. He could have told himself it was nothing, just a fox, perhaps, or a trick of the mind. But he knew better. His instincts, dulled though they were by time and grief, still sharpened in the presence of danger. For the first time in years, he felt alive. The problem with Ivan's life had always been this: he was waiting to die. Not in a dramatic way, not with fire or glory, but in silence, in rot, in the way forgotten barns crumble in the fields. And yet he feared death, not because of the unknown, but because he had done nothing to earn peace. He had left his life unfinished, broken, corrupted by mistakes he had never repaired. He feared, most of all, that he would never have a chance to make things right. The villagers never asked for his help. The few who dared speak to him did so out of obligation, never warmth. He had been cut off, walled inside his own bitterness. But the scream was a call. Perhaps not for him, not directly, but it pierced through the cage he had built around himself. The push to action came in the form of a discovery. As he made his way into the forest, his boots crunching against twigs, he found more than silence. He found tracks in the mud, small shoes, a child's, running, stumbling. And then larger prints, heavier, purposeful, following. Ivan crouched, running his rough fingers across the impressions. His pulse quickened. This was not a game, not a child wandering too far. Someone had been chasing. He stood slowly, his breath fogging in the cold night air. He did not have a weapon, not anymore, but the fire in his blood began to burn, an old flame refusing to die out. If the world still has monsters, he thought, then perhaps it still has use for me. And for the first time in decades, the old soldier began to move with purpose. The forest grew darker as he followed the trail. Branches clawed at his coat, the ground dipped and twisted. Every step hurt, but he welcomed the pain. His body was weak, but his instincts were iron. He remembered moving like this long ago, chasing enemies through broken landscapes, searching for signs, reading the earth like a book. As he pressed on, the night seemed to thicken around him. An owl shrieked overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a branch cracked. Ivan froze, listening. His hand, out of instinct, reached for his belt where once a pistol had rested. But there was nothing. Just his bare fists, scarred and trembling. Then, faintly, he heard it, muffled crying. A child's voice. He followed the sound. And though the years weighed on him, though his body screamed for rest, Ivan Petrov pushed deeper into the forest, toward the echo of fear, toward the edge of something he did not yet understand, toward the fight that would either destroy him or redeem him. Branches lashed at his face, the ground slick with moss threatened to betray him at every step. Yet Ivan moved with a strange determination, as though the years had melted away, leaving only the hardened soldier who once navigated battlefields under fire. The child's sobs had faded into silence, but the trail of footprints guided him still, small, stumbling imprints pressed deep into the earth, each one tugging at the last fragile thread of humanity left inside him. Ivan had no plan, no weapon, no allies. All he carried was the weight of his past and a body rusted by age. But the boy's cry had awakened something buried, a responsibility he thought long dead. He stopped to catch his breath, leaning against a tree. His chest burned, his breath ragged. In the distance, through the heavy curtain of branches, a faint glow flickered. Fire. Ivan's instinct sharpened like a knife. He dropped lower, moving quietly now, each step measured. Memories flooded back, uninvited memories of approaching enemy camps, of firelight reflecting off helmets, of the whispered prayers of his men before the ambush. The glow grew brighter until finally he saw it, a small clearing, where the ground had been disturbed, leaves kicked aside, branches broken. A fire crackled in the center, crude and angry, fed by logs stripped from the forest floor. And near it, the boy may be 10 years old, thin, shaking, bound at the wrists with rough rope. Ivan's pulse pounded. He scanned the shadows, and his stomach clenched as he saw them. 2 men. They were not soldiers, not disciplined, not trained. But they carried the stink of desperation, of violence waiting for opportunity. Their clothes were ragged, but layered, built for survival in the cold nights. One sat by the fire, sharpening a long hunting knife, while the other prowled the edge of the clearing, muttering to himself and glancing at the boy with a hunger that turned Ivan's blood to ice. Ivan crouched in the brush, mind racing. He had fought wars, but never like this, not with the body of an old man, not with empty hands. In his prime, to men with knives would have been nothing. Now, they were death itself if he made one wrong move. And yet he knew he could not walk away. He remembered Kirill, his son, when he had been about the same age as that boy. The memory struck like a blade, a night when Kirill had woken screaming from a nightmare. Ivan had not comforted him. He had barked orders, told him to be silent, to be strong. Anna had wept silently in the next room, watching as the gap between father and son widened like a canyon. Ivan had failed his own child. And now, perhaps, this was his punishment or his chance. No more running. No more silence. He scanned the ground around him. A fallen branch lay half buried in the leaves, thick, solid. He gripped it, testing its weight. A crude weapon, but better than nothing. His fingers trembled, but not from fear. From anticipation. The old soldier in him stirred fully awake. Ivan began to circle the clearing, moving like a Volf, slow and deliberate. He needed to strike with precision, to end it quickly, before the men even realized what was happening. But his body reminded him with every step he was not the Volf he once was. He was an old, tired hound with fading teeth. The prowling man turned suddenly, his head snapping toward the trees. Ivan froze, pressing himself against the trunk. His lungs screamed for air, but he forced his breathing silent. The man muttered something to his companion and wandered closer to the trees, knife glinting in the firelight. This was it. Ivan gripped the branch tighter. His mind screamed wait, but his blood answered now. He lunged from the shadows. The branch cracked against the man's skull with a sickening thud. The attacker collapsed, knife clattering to the ground. For an instant, silence. Then chaos. The second man shot up from the fire, his eyes wild, blade flashing. He charged. Ivan barely had time to raise the branch before the knife slashed across his coat, tearing fabric, grazing skin. Pain flared, sharp and hot. He grunted, shoving back with all the strength left in him. The branch connected with the man's ribs, but it wasn't enough. The younger man staggered, snarled, and drove forward again. Ivan fell backward, crashing into the dirt. The knife hovered above him, descending fast. For a heartbeat, he saw his death in the glint of steel. And then his hand found the fallen knife of the first man. His grip closed around it instinctively, muscle memory flooding back. In one motion, he drove the blade upward. The man screamed, collapsing onto Ivan, blood spilling hot and fast. The forest went silent except for the boy's ragged sobs and Ivan's heavy breathing. The old man shoved the body aside and struggled to his knees. His chest ached, his arms trembled, but he was alive. Alive, and the boy was still breathing. He stumbled to the fire, cutting the rope with shaking hands. The boy flinched, terrified, but Ivan's voice was low, steady, almost fatherly. "You're safe now," he whispered in Russian, the words rough but sincere. "No one will hurt you." The boy looked at him through swollen eyes, tears streaking dirty cheeks. For a moment, Ivan thought he saw Kirill's face again, fearful, fragile, looking at a father who never knew how to be gentle. The boy threw his arms around him, clinging like a lifeline. Ivan froze, then slowly wrapped his arms around the child. His throat tightened. For the first time in decades, he felt needed. But the crisis was not over. From the direction of the forest came voices, more men, moving closer. Ivan's ears, dulled though they were, caught the rhythm of boots against earth. 2, 3, maybe more. Panic surged through him, but it did not paralyze him. It sharpened him. He doused the fire quickly, covering the flames with dirt. The night swallowed the clearing in darkness. He guided the boy to his side, pressing a finger to his lips. The child nodded, trembling. They could not stay. Dragging the boy with him, Ivan slipped back into the trees just as the voices reached the clearing. Shouts erupted as the men found their companions, one unconscious, one bleeding out. Rage carried in their words. Rage and vengeance. The hunt had begun. Ivan moved through the forest with a speed that surprised even him. The boy clung to his coat, stumbling, but Ivan never let go of his hand. Every snap of a twig behind them, every flash of torchlight between the trees, sent adrenaline surging through his veins. It was war again. A different battlefield, but war nonetheless. And war was the one thing Ivan Petrov understood. Yet this was not just about survival. This was about redemption. Each step he took, each breath he drew, he felt a strange clarity. He was not running for himself anymore. He was running for the boy, for the life ahead of him, for the chance to give another child what he had failed to give his own. At last, they stumbled into a hollow beneath an uprooted tree. Ivan pulled the boy inside, wrapping his arm protectively around him as the torchlight passed nearby. He held his breath as footsteps crunched only meters away. The men cursed, shouted, spread out. The forest pulsed with their hunt. Ivan could smell sweat, smoke, blood. The boy pressed his face into Ivan's chest, muffling sobs. Ivan's heart pounded, but he felt strangely calm. He had been here before, pinned down, hunted, outnumbered. He knew how to survive. He knew how to endure. But this time was different, because survival was no longer enough. As the men drifted further into the woods, Ivan whispered into the boy's ear, "Listen to me. We cannot go home. Not yet. They will follow us. But we will find a way. I promise you." The boy nodded weakly, his small hand gripping Ivan's tightly. And in that moment, as Ivan looked into the boy's tear-filled eyes, he realized something that nearly broke him. He could no longer save his own son. But maybe, just maybe, he could save someone else's. The turning point was clear. The old soldier was back, not for glory, not for war, but for redemption. The night stretched on, filled with danger. But Ivan Petrov would not stop. Not until the boy was safe. Not until he had carved meaning out of the ruins of his wasted life. And as the forest closed around them, as the hunt intensified, the old man whispered to himself like a vow, "This time, I will not fail." The night was alive with pursuit. Ivan's legs ached, his lungs burned, but he pressed forward, dragging the boy through the underbrush. Behind them, the men shouted orders, torches flickering through the trees like restless spirits. Every voice echoed with violence, every step of pursuit promised death. The boy stumbled again, nearly falling. Ivan caught him, pulling him close. "Quiet, lad," he whispered, his voice harsh but protective. "You must be strong now. Just a little longer." The boy nodded, biting his lip to stop the sobs. His small hand gripped Ivan's with desperate trust. Ivan's chest tightened. That trust was both a gift and a curse. It demanded that he live, that he succeed, that he become the man he had failed to be decades ago. The forest thinned, opening into a stretch of marshland. The ground was wet, sucking at their boots with every step. The moonlight cut through the trees, silver and cold. Ivan paused, scanning the horizon. To the east lay the village, too far, too dangerous. To the west, deeper forest, perhaps safety, but only if they could outlast the hunters. His instincts whispered a different path, not escape, but confrontation. He knew men like this. He had seen them in war zones, scavengers feeding on chaos. They would not stop. If Ivan ran forever, the boy would collapse, and the end would be the same. No. The only way forward was through. He guided the boy to a dry patch beneath an overhang rock, hiding him in the shadows. Ivan crouched, gripping the boy's shoulders, his eyes burning with urgency. "Listen carefully. No matter what happens, you do not move. Do you hear me? You stay hidden until I come for you. Promise me." The boy's lips trembled, but he nodded. "Promise," Ivan demanded. I promise," the boy whispered. Ivan exhaled, heavy with relief and dread. He brushed the boy's hair back, a gesture that felt unfamiliar, almost alien to his hardened hands. For a brief moment, he was a father again. Then he rose, gripping the knife he had taken, and stepped into the marsh. The voices drew closer, torches bobbing like fireflies in the night. Ivan crouched low, his breath steady, his body trembling with a mix of exhaustion and grim resolve. He counted at least 3 men, 2 with knives, one carrying what looked like a makeshift club studded with nails. They moved with cruel confidence, laughing, jeering, eager for blood. Ivan waited until they were close enough to smell the smoke on their clothes. Then, with the precision of a predator, he struck. He burst from the shadows, knife flashing, and slashed the first man across the throat before the torch could rise. Blood sprayed across the reeds. The man collapsed without a sound. The second attacker roared, swinging his club. Ivan ducked, the weapon grazing his shoulder with bone-shattering force. Pain exploded through him, but adrenaline drowned it. He drove the knife into the man's gut, twisting hard. The man screamed, staggering backward, collapsing into the mud. The third froze, eyes wide, torch shaking in his hands. For a heartbeat, Ivan saw his own reflection in those eyes, an old, blood-soaked ghost, risen from the grave. "Run!" Ivan growled, his voice low, deadly. The man did. He dropped the torch and fled into the forest, shouting incoherently. Silence settled, broken only by Ivan's ragged breathing. His body trembled, not just from exertion, but from the weight of what he had done. The old soldier had returned, but the cost was heavy. His shoulder throbbed, blood seeping through his coat. He stumbled back to the rock, where the boy waited, eyes wide with terror and awe. "Are they gone?" the boy whispered. "For now," Ivan said, forcing steadiness into his voice. "But more may come. We must move." The boy nodded, and together they slipped back into the forest. The night dragged on like an endless battlefield. Ivan guided the boy with relentless determination, ignoring the pain tearing through his shoulder. Every step was agony, but he refused to stop. He remembered the promise this time, "I will not fail." At dawn, they reached the edge of the forest. The village lay in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, peaceful and oblivious. Ivan almost collapsed at the sight of it. But as they emerged from the trees, a figure appeared on the path. Not a stranger. A man he recognized instantly, though the years had carved him into someone older, colder. Kirill, his son. For a moment, Ivan thought it was a hallucination, a cruel trick of exhaustion. But the boy beside him gasped, tugging at his sleeve. No, it was real. His son stood before him, dressed in the clothes of a city man, eyes hard as stone. I heard the commotion in the forest, Kirill said flatly. People said there were bandits. And then I see you, father, stumbling out of the trees with blood on your hands. Still the same, aren't you? Ivan's heart twisted. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I saved him, he rasped, pushing the boy gently forward. He was taken. I brought him back. Kirill's eyes flicked to the boy, then back to his father. Cold, unreadable. You expect me to believe this? He asked. After all these years, you show up covered in blood, dragging some child with you? No one will believe you. They will say you killed again. The words cut deeper than any knife. Ivan fell to his knees, trembling. I swear to you I did this for him. For you. I could not save you, Kirill. I could not be the father you needed. But I will not let another boy suffer. Not while I still breathe. For the first time, Kirill's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes glistened. You always had an excuse, he whispered. War, duty, shadows in your head. And now you want redemption? After it's too late. The silence stretched. The boy clung to Ivan's arm, his small frame shaking. Then, slowly, Kirill stepped forward. He crouched, his eyes locking onto the boy's. What's your name? He asked softly. The boy hesitated, then whispered it. Kirill looked at Ivan again. There was no forgiveness in his gaze, but there was something else, recognition, perhaps, of the man his father had once been. You did one thing right, Kirill said finally. For once in your life, you chose to protect instead of destroy. Ivan bowed his head, tears burning his eyes. The villagers came soon after, alerted by the fleeing bandit. They listened to Kirill's account, to the boy's trembling testimony. For the first time in decades, Ivan was not seen as a monster. He was seen as a man who had fought for someone else, who had saved a child. And yet Ivan knew the truth. This was not redemption, not fully. His sins could never be erased. But perhaps they could be balanced, even just a little. That night, Ivan sat alone on his porch, the boy safe with a family in the village, Kirill watching from a distance. The stars burned overhead, cold and eternal. He lit his pipe, inhaled deeply, and exhaled into the night. For the first time in years, the silence did not suffocate him. It comforted him. He had not fixed the past. He had not regained his son. But he had done something that mattered. Something that gave weight to the years left to him. The war inside him was not over. It never would be. But for once, he felt he had won a battle. Epilogue. Weeks later, children in the village no longer whispered about the old ghost by the lake. They whispered about the man who had fought the bandits, who had saved a boy. Ivan Petrov walked the market square, slower now, weaker, but with his head held higher. Some greeted him with nods, others with quiet words of thanks. And sometimes, from a distance, he caught sight of Kirill, watching him. Their eyes would meet, and though no words passed, there was something there, an unfinished bridge, fragile but real. One evening, as the sun set over the lake, Ivan returned to the pier where it had all begun. He sat once more with his boots dangling above the water. The reflection of the firelight, the screams, the violence, they haunted him still. But now, when he closed his eyes, he also heard another sound, the boy's voice, whispering his promise, trusting him. And that was enough. Ivan smiled faintly, the lines of his face softening. The story was not about a hero. It was about a broken man who, in the final chapters of his life, chose to fight for something greater than himself. And in doing so, he discovered that even the darkest ghosts can be silenced not by glory, not by forgiveness, but by one act of love.